The eddy plays an important role in the ocean biology and dynamics, providing both vertical and horizontal transport of nutrients. In this research, we propose a new eddy detection approach using a combination of the sea surface height and the velocity field. The left figure presents the Kuroshio current in red and the eddies detected in the North Pacific in yellow to blue. The right figure shows the Gulf Stream in red and the eddies detected in the North Atlantic in yellow to blue. For our primary examples, we use a numerical simulation of the Red Sea that was provided to the IEEE SciViz Contest 2020 by the Red Sea Modeling and Prediction Group under Professor Hotoit at KAUST. This figure shows the surface velocity magnitude pattern and the 3D extent of the Red Sea dataset. In our previous approach, we used the Okubo-Weiss parameter as a threshold to extract the eddies as regions with Okubo-Weiss values below a fixed threshold. The Okubo-Weiss parameter is designed to describe the relationship between shear and rotation. This criteria is widely used in the oceanography community to detect eddy structures on 2D surfaces. However, we find the Okubo-Weiss-based approach mostly only extracts the core regions of eddies. Here are two examples of potential eddies with the velocity magnitude in blue to yellow, streamlines in black, and the region detected by the Okubo-Weiss-based approach shown in red. Compared with the region outlined by a cluster of streamlines, the Okubo-Weiss-based approach does not include the complete region of an eddy. These first slides explore something of what is happening. We hope understanding how the properties of an eddy are related to various measures will help us determine how to extract a relatively complete region of each eddy. Key properties look at how the center of the extracted eddy region relates to the velocity minimum, how the extracted boundary relates to the streamlines, and the general symmetry of the extracted region. In this case, the Okubo-Weiss threshold extracts a region that seems offset from the velocity minimum, crosses streamlines, and has an asymmetric to irregular shape. We explored how adjusting the Okubo-Weiss threshold impacted the extracted boundary. Here we show two thresholds. The lower Okubo-Weiss value extracts a core region that includes the velocity minimum but is offset therefrom. Relaxing the threshold extracts a broader region but is still offset from the velocity minimum and has an irregular shape. So, how can we extract a region more representative of the outer eddy as well as the inner core of the eddy? Previous research has shown that the detection of the center can be critical in the eddy detection process. Oceanographically, we expect to find the sea surface height anomaly co-located with the velocity minimum at the center of an eddy. The center is expected to be near a minimum in the Okubo-Weiss parameter and near the center of a set of closed streamlines. Thus, to find eddy centers, we start by detecting the local maximum and minimum of sea surface height. After that, we find all the velocity minimums in a neighborhood around each sea surface height extremum. These velocity minimum are used to locate a precise center for each eddy candidate. However, these features would still be the center of other oceanographic structures like meanders. Thus, we need to verify that these centers satisfy the geometric structure of an eddy. For this purpose, we assume an eddy has a circular shape and test 4 different geometric criteria. To start, we pick out 16 points on the circle that is 3 grid cells away from the center. Condition 1 checks that each 2 consecutive points on the border have a similar net velocity. For condition 2, we check whether the direction of the consecutive velocity vectors on the border changes gradually in a consistent direction. In practice, we find we need to allow some exceptions, as local currents and turbulence create some wobble in the vector directions. Condition 2a defines what level of exceptions are permitted. For condition 3, we test that the velocity vectors on the border are approximately parallel to the tangent direction of the boundary. Finally, as condition 4, we check the symmetry of the vectors across the center to confirm the rotation direction remains consistent. After the verification, we applied our test conditions to circles with larger and larger radii until there is a failure of the test conditions. The circle just inside the circle which fails the test conditions becomes the estimated border of the eddy. The same process is applied layer by layer to get a 3D structure of the eddy. Here we have plotted all the eddies we detected by applying the hybrid method to the first time step of the first ensemble member of the Red Sea dataset against the velocity magnitude map. Next, we highlight a large eddy in the Gulf of Aden to showcase the 3D structures. Note, the bottom apex of the eddy is not directly beneath the center of the eddy on the surface. While the forced circular shape limits what we learn about the surface eddy shape, this method does have the flexibility to detect curling and spiraling at the vortex core with depth, and to constrain the 3D volume and shape of the eddy. We looked at the sensitivity of our detection results to the particular choices of parameter for both the initial center determination and the velocity field tests. Increasing the search box size leads to fewer local extremums and fewer velocity minimums. To optimize our computation, but also extract as many candidates as possible, we set the sea surface height search box to 5 grid cells, which maintains the maximum number of candidates, and we set the velocity search box size to 3 grid cells, which we consider the minimum meaningful size for an eddy. Several parameters are crucial to the implementation of the velocity field tests. The constraint for minimum velocity variance along the eddy border was relaxed to detect as many eddies as possible. To set the constraints on the variance in velocity direction along the border, we looked at the dependence of the number of features passed as an eddy on the largest permitted angle difference and the number of reverse direction changes. The number of eddies detected grows slowly above a permitted difference of 108 degrees. Thus, we set the maximum permitted difference to 108 degrees. The number of features accepted as eddies increases as the number of reverse direction changes permitted is increased. These angle criterion affect the number and identity of eddies detected most strongly of all the parameters for the rotation tests. This reflects our common sense that rotation and swirl define an eddy. To evaluate how well the new hybrid method works, we compared it with the Okubo-Weiss and the winding angle approaches. The winding angle approach works by detecting closed streamlines in the velocity field, then detecting an eddy boundary as a cluster of streamlines. Among all 3 approaches, the winding angle consistently detects the core region of the eddy. Our new approach generally detects the same eddies, but includes a broader region around each eddy. The Okubo-Weiss approach yields a less consistent detection and often a more irregular boundary. Looking at more quantitative comparisons, these initial comparisons suggest the new hybrid method minimizes false detections, which we expect is due to the velocity field tests. In contrast, both the Okubo-Weiss and the winding angle approaches show a large number of unique detections. The large number of unique detections by the winding angle method are primarily very small features with radii of less than 5 grid cells. The winding angle approach uses an unsupervised clustering algorithm to detect the boundary of the eddy. This can detect a closed streamline in a very small region, but inspection of such features often suggests they result from turbulence between two streams or fronts rather than being true eddies. We also note that our new hybrid method is computationally inexpensive. We also compared our new results with reported results from several studies in the SciViz Contest 2020 on the same Red Sea dataset. A quantitative count of overlapping and unique detections was conducted manually. Larger eddies are detected by all methods, including our new hybrid method. However, all methods detected some eddies that other methods did not. This suggests that eddy detection is very sensitive to the assumptions about the definition of an eddy and the details of the detection methods. Going back to the streamline figure we showed at the beginning, the Okubo-Weiss based approach extracted what seems like half an eddy with the extracted boundary crossing streamlines. In contrast, our new hybrid method extracts more of the core streamline region and crosses streamlines only outside the cluster of streamlines surrounding the eddy core. The precisely correct boundary of the eddy is arguable, and perhaps a matter left to oceanographers. Nevertheless, we think our new hybrid method provides a more satisfying result. The next step is applying a feature tracking algorithm on our detection result across timeframes. With such tracking algorithms, oceanographers could recognize the trace and history of an eddy in a 3D view and learn more about the dynamic processes of eddies in deep water. Here, white lines trace the centers of the yellow to blue 3D eddies back through time to show the past or recent movements of the eddies. We also applied our method to datasets for the North Atlantic and the North Pacific. Here, small black lines connect to the yellow centers of the 3D eddies in blue to show the recent movement of the eddies. Thank you for listening.